Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Testing, 69,
Okay, yeah.
69.
So let me do the intro, and then we'll. Hey, and welcome to the show. Today we have a very special guest in a kind of part 2 to an earlier episode, because we're talking about Burma again, folks, and this time about post-coup Burma. And if you haven't heard our first episode on Burma, please go back and check it out. And so we're joined by, let's call him Nyan. We need to be a bit anonymous here, but we can say you're a Burmese communist who grew up in the ethnic minority world, right?
Yes.
Okay. So really he's the perfect guest, and we're very grateful to have him join us. And of course, I'm also joined by Samai, who will be reprising his role as guy who doesn't know much about Burma, but it's nice to have him around.
I mean, yeah, okay. Also, in the beginning, are you going to just say hey every time you introduce an episode? Is that your new thing?
Yeah, I didn't mean to start that off as a thing. I might. Okay,
Hey.
I'll cut it. I don't like it. You're right.
I think you're a Moana fan.
That's good.
I'm gonna self-crit that. All right.
No,
so
no,
anyway,
okay.
Samai, how you doing? You good? You well?
I'm happy to be back on in the saddle. However, that usually means that I'm in control of my voices, but I'm not. What I mean is, I'm glad to be here talking to you two, because it's been a while. You've been away.
Back in the goddamn booth. I have been away once again, going for my ideological training in southern Lebanon.
Wow.
Periodically.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe we should just kind of get into it, talking about
Yes, indeed.
So
Burma. So yeah, Nyan, do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about your background, what you can tell us?
okay. So a little disclaimer here. This is my first time in any sort of podcast or like transmission, so recording. So I might make a little mistake. I'm a little nervous right now. So please bear with me.
Don't worry.
That's fine. No pressure. We're all friends. We're all comrades.
Yeah, comrade. So okay, a little bit of background. Yeah, I like what you call, like we call here kabya, like a mixed blood. Like I have a lot, almost half ethnic group in me. So I won't be specific about it. So because to keep it a little anonymous. But I grew up in the cities, and later, like due to my father's political activities, we have to run away, and like we live a bit like in refugee camp in Thailand. Yeah. So, and although I didn't know at the time, but later I realized that my dad was a comrade too. So yeah, but he never like pushed his beliefs on me. I think it's a good thing, because like in the past you see like many leaders try to make their children act like them, and they always turn the opposite way, like Michael Parenti having a liberal child. Oh, that's gonna hurt.
Or Kamala Harris's dad. So you're from a good kind of background to speak on these matters.
So I only become like a communist out of accident. I was like reading in the bookstore, and I was like, there is like a book written by like CBB member about Soviet Union. And I was like,
That's the Communist Party Burma, by the way.
Yeah.
Not the Communist Party of Britain.
And I was like, I never know about Soviet Union. All my life, all I know was like Russia, Soviet, all the same, So maybe it won't hurt. And once I read like, Dad, what is dialectics? Dad, what is materialism? And it all began from there. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So could you kind of let's try and kind of like, what I wanted to do here is I wanted to kind of split the show into a little bit of like a pre-coup and post-coup like explainer. So, I mean, let's kind of talk about, because we already did an episode where we went into quite a lot of the background on the political situation in Burma. That was before the coup.
Okay.
So could we, I'm quite curious about, from a leftist perspective, your opinion on Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD's leadership of the country, and how you saw them as whether they were a progressive force or not. Generally, your kind of views on them is what I'm curious about.
So because of the Honda refusing to step down, unlike I hope you guys notice like a lot of like U.S. backed or like non-aligned dictators stepping down, like Pinochet stepped down, that dude from South Korea, I don't know his name, like stepped down. Yeah, like most of them stepped down, but the Burmese dictator didn't. I'm not saying like Burmese dictator were like backed by U.S. that they just stay like neutral. Yeah, but
yeah, I mean they kept a presence. So we can talk about maybe the 2008 Constitution, right?
Since the 2008 Constitution was drafted since like 96, so they took a very long time, and they quickly like finally finished it right after like Nagis, cyclone, the one of the worst disaster happened in modern times in our country, and so they quickly like approved the referendum. 90% approval rate, something like that. Like because most of them don't even know how to go to vote, or even most of them are still struggling to get a footing back after the disaster, and among other things like 25% default seats in upper and lower parliaments. I think you already know it.
So that 25% of seats will go straight to junta appointees. So it will be former military who are now have an appointed seat in the parliament, right?
Yeah, and another thing was like if they want to change or do like meaningful referendums, they need to have the approval of more than 75% of the seats. So yeah, that's never going to happen, like because of the 25 default seats.
So this kind of 2008 constitution was a way of the Tamada keeping some control over the country when they, at least to the Western world or to the outside world, it looked like, we're giving way to democracy, but this constitution was still in there to limit the power of any future government, right?
Yes, so 2008 allowed the like transition of democracy. They were like, the West is finally like, they're changing. So they began to invest, the capital began to flow, and then like, what do we say? Like the junta get a chance to like little breather, like, yeah. So policy-wise, NLD didn't do much. They were like riding on their fame in the 90s. Like they were like the first. So yeah, they have like the name, and Aung San Suu Kyi is like the daughter of Aung San. So yeah, she got a name credit to like name value, like very large cult of personality. Even today, like even though she is doing literally nothing. Okay, I might trickle.
So it seems like the big change really was not the policies of the NLD or Suu Kyi, but rather it was the influx of foreign capital, right?
Yes.
That really changed people's lives in a meaningful way.
Yes, like people started to use internet, like the country, like literally, like the doors were open.
So what kind of like, can we talk about some of the negative kind of impacts this had for working people?
So basically like unions were no longer banned, like political thought were encouraged, like there are like university leftist groups, and then once banned books, like leftist books, history books, were able to publish. I even managed to buy them a lot. I waste a lot of money on the books, and so aside from that, working class condition didn't improve much. Like we another thing was like the city planning. I studied there. Like I attended university back in my country. So like I was in Yangon, and it really sucked. Like they didn't. So how would I put it this way? Like they will build stuff, but it's redundant and pointless. They can show it like, we're building something, we're making something, but it doesn't improve much. They didn't really solve anything. The only reason they got popular approval first time was like, as I said, the 90s, and the second time was like the recent 2021. People were like, even though there were more parties like national and democratic and youth parties going into the elections, running for election, people voted for NLD out of complacency and fear of like the 25 default seats in Tamarol. Like they want they don't want the military to form like a government. Yeah, so they voted en masse for them.
So yeah, is it because like you said, like working class people's lives didn't really improve under the NLD? Is that because of the lack of action by the NLD, or is that because of the lingering presence of the Tamadar, or both maybe?
But I would say both, and of course I don't know much about South Africa, but Aung San Suu Kyi kind of Nelson Mandela, after like they get rid of apartheid, kind of remind me of them. Like South Africa didn't improve much, like there were like strikes happen later on. Yeah, but I don't want to like make a bold claim because I don't know much about South Africa. But from my like outsider view, yeah, it's kind of similar. Like Mandela like went the soft way, as you can say.
Interestingly enough, because like the combination of basically a military presence entrenching themselves in the legislation, and then plus a center liberal party like doing nothing. It sounds like a lot of states actually have this like similar combination. If like in South America, this is a thing. Like post dictatorships, they have legislation and constitutions that come from those eras, and then they have shit parties that don't really go anywhere. So I don't really have a question. I was just making a sort of
comparison.
Well, it kind of reminds me of Preut in a way as well.
And then I was going to get there. Right? So what is it? What is it?
Well, it's clever. I mean, it's like this way of ensuring a future for yourself while allowing you as an authoritarian power, while allowing, or whatever word we want to use, while allowing this kind of Western style democracy to play out in the foreground, whereas in the background you very much still have control over the economy, over the wealth basically of the country, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like it's not the only thing happening in Burma. The only difference is like our country was really isolated, so no one know much about it, and that's where like the misnomer like, oh, we need to support the Tamador, like, oh, that's very cringe. Like we'll get to that later.
For sure.
Okay.
So we should probably talk about the Rohingya crisis or the Rohingya genocide. Do you want to kind of give a little overview of that? I'm sure a lot of people know about it at least a bit already.
Even I do.
So officially we have like 135 ethnic groups, although that can be a little bit misleading because some groups are like just different dialects. So yeah, you can group them in one group. That's why we have like 8 major groups. Outside of that, we don't recognize Indians, Nepalese, Chinese, and one of them is Rohingyas. While like Indians and Chinese can get like a visiting citizenship, it's not a full citizenship. I don't think Rohingya get the luxury of that, and they always like whenever like Rakhine State they have rebels too. So whenever like things are getting a little messy, the government, the junta, the military government will like incite those native Rakhine people with Rohingya. They're invaders. Get rid of them. Like, something like that. That rhetoric always play out like in the 60s, in the 70s. Like, but of course, we don't hear about it much because it happened in Rakhine first and it didn't get reported much. And the same thing happened like in Rohingya crisis. It's basically before that happened, there were already like anti-Muslim, anti-Hindu, like anti-Indian basically, like things going on in major cities. It's very ugly. Like there were like people getting burned. So there were like precedents, and Rohingya crisis happened. It coincidentally like at the same time the Chinese there was like agreement like the Chinese company are going to build like a special economic zone in that region, like Jiaopu exclusive economic zone or something like that. Yeah. So most of the framing in the media was like Rohingyas are like illegals. Like they're invading, they're not us. It's us versus them basically, and many people like supported them. Even Aung San Suu Kyi was like, "Yeah, us versus them." So, so it can be said like Aung San Suu Kyi being like a Burmese nationalist at heart, which has some merit. Okay.
I wanted to say as well, can we talk about Wiratu as well?
Oh yeah, Wiratu rose like during that time, like
And he was
anti-Indian
sorry. Can we just
sentiment.
say he was a
You gotta tell me
very
who that was.
radical nationalist Buddhist monk
Oh.
who was one of the I mean, am I right in saying he was one of the main inciting factors? And he was a very right wing Tamadar supporting monk as well. And I understand he was like one of the main social factors for inciting this kind of ethnic hatred, right?
It is basically he's basically a proxy of Tamador, just like Bulat Lashwe, a rider, but he is formerly a soldier, Burmese Tamador soldier turned rider, like Bulat Lashwe. Yeah, he is also one of the factors. Of course.
So I wanted to point this out because, like you say, a lot of this ethnic hatred came from Suu Kyi and her supporters, but then at the same time from the Tamadar. So both sides very much have blood on their hands for what happened to the Rohingya.
Okay.
Can I ask a sort of historical question that I just give us a short as possible answer, because I'm sure this will take a lot of context. But when did the hatred start, or when did the neglect or whatever it is start for the Rohingya?
It's okay. One of the things is like the lack of information flow. I'm like, honestly speaking, as someone who lived and grew up in Yangon, I can guarantee like that we don't even know our entire city. Is literally our life. Our life is like a little path, like little road path. We go to school, like we go to shop. That's all. That's our Burma. We don't know about Kachin. We don't know about
This was during
Chin.
the junta era.
Yeah, like information was pretty much cut off. If you want to know, read newspaper. But who is to believe? Yeah. So okay. Of course, there is like a neglect. That's why people are saying like, oh, we are sorry about the Rohingya right now. So it's understandable. Like most people didn't even know outside of their little community. Most people are.
But so it was this so what was this, like a state-made decision to sort of target the Rohingya, or what was? Because I'm trying to contextualize it. Like I can sort of grasp how anti-Semitism rose in Europe, but I can't exactly figure out what was.
Oh, okay.
What's going on with
Before anti-Indian stuff, there was like anti-Chinese already. Like they was already flipping left right, like anti-Indian, then comes anti-China, anti-Indian, anti-China, like flipping all over the place. So during the most of the time, if you look at our history, like most successful people in the cities tend to be Indians and Chinese. So you can see the parallels between the Jews in the Europe. They're successful. We're not. They're stealing our business. Like no.
And the Rohingya are included in this Indian concept.
Indian.
Okay. I was. Okay.
Okay. So basically, Aung San Suu Kyi, you can say like she is a Burmese nationalist because like she hates Rohingya, but really that's kind of behavior like common in like Western liberals. Like they will preach about equality or like rights, freedom, and stuff, as long as it's in their country. Outsiders, sorry about that. Like we hate you. Like we will put you in camps and stuff. Yeah, that's basically what happened. And the most baffling thing was like, of course, we all know that Aung San Suu Kyi defended Tamador on behalf at the Hague.
So can we then just back up a little bit and talk about the actual violence that occurred, because it was really localized, right? So there were kind of, as far as I'm aware, there were kind of two major aspects to the violence. One was, like I say, very localized, which was kind of villager on villager or village versus village of massacres, killings with machetes, burnings, horrific stuff. And then the Tamadar were also involved in these massacres as well against the Rohingya, right?
That one of the reasons, like Arakan army, the main army in Rakhine, was reluctant in the early stages of these current fighting. Like they don't want to join in. One of the reasons was like they didn't say it directly. Like their supporters say it like indirectly. Like red stick, green stick, doesn't matter. Both hurt. What they mean was like green stick. Green is the color of the Tamador party. Red is the color of NLD. Like green stick, red stick, doesn't matter. Both hurt. Like we need to understand them, like their plight. You can see it. Also, the Western media, they suddenly care about Rohingya Muslims. I mean, like, unlike in that Uyghur situation, like unlike the Uyghur situation, which is like
Hold on, we've
Rohingya.
managed to go like 50 episodes without bringing up the Uyghurs. Let's not do it, dude.
Okay. Sorry. You can cut it off. Okay. So in a Rohingya situation, like there are like a lot of refugees across the Southeast Asia, like Malaysia, Bangladesh, India, Thailand. So yeah, there were like a huge refugee crisis there too. So it's a really big thing, but keep in mind, Karen people, Kachin, other ethnic minority, treated similarly too, but the West suddenly decided to care just because like they are doing business with China, basically, like building stuff with China. Yeah. Of course, that I mean, like there are other factors too, like they have a gas pipeline or such. But of course, that's one of the factors we need to keep in mind. Like the timing was just so convenient.
I mean, also, I just want to make one thing clear. Like, I don't want to equate the violence against the Rohingya as exactly the same as against, let's say, the Kachin, for example, because it was a lot more brutal against the Rohingya in terms of like mass killings. Like, you haven't really had mass killings like that elsewhere in the country.
Of course,
memory, yeah.
Of course, I'm not like diminishing or like ignoring. Like, oh, it doesn't matter much. No. You don't get me wrong.
Sure.
Of course, most people in the city don't know. Like, some of my friends even say during that time, when in 2019, like AA was fighting back, they say like, why you ethnic rebels are fighting? Like, we treat them well and such. And he didn't understand, but he apologized me like a month ago. Like, man, I said that to you that one time.
So, can we then get on to the 2020 elections?
Yeah. Okay.
So there was an election. It was almost at around exactly the same time as the elections in the US, if anybody wants to date it. And NLD won a staggeringly big victory, right? It was something like 70% of the vote.
Yeah. Even though, like I said, like no, the ordinary life of the ordinary people didn't improve much, aside from like the superficial stuff, like getting to use internet, like fashion, like stuff, television, media. Another thing you need to keep in mind that there was a COVID pandemic happening in the background. Like Aung San Suu Kyi got a lot of flack during that time because, like, her handling is very bad. She was indecisive, like whether she should like shut down everything or like other Asian country does, or does nothing.
But she still won a huge majority in the election, right?
Yeah, that's baffling, right? Like the unemployment rose very bad during that time, and of course, I think you know about it. But before the election, there was like a massive rallies and parade, ignoring the COVID safety standards. Lobbying. What do we say? Like kowtowing, or what do we say? Like for like vote for NLD. Like it's like a really big match, like between like USDP and NLD supporters.
So I mean, immediately after the elections, there was talk from the right wing USDP, who are the Tamadol-backed party, that it was rigged.
Voting fraud.
Yeah, sorry, voting fraud. That there was voting fraud in the election. However, I mean, maybe a little bit, but I really don't think that was significant. I think what explains, and people are often surprised by how much of a margin the NLD won by, but I think you have to remember that people are very afraid to vote for third parties because of this 25% percentage in parliament that the military retain. So that people really, really are concerned to vote for any more progressive parties. There are a lot of very progressive parties in Burma, but people won't vote for them because they're afraid of the military.
So like I'm ethnic from the ethnic minority. There were like ethnic minority groups that were actually mad because they didn't get any votes and stuff. Yeah, so that's, you can see there, like
that's what you get for being born the wrong ethnicity.
Oh.
Thanks, Amai.
I'm just giving the
Okay.
perspective of the state. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hi, Domra.
So-
Okay,
yeah.
so I want to cover a little bit like wrong ethnicity. Like in our ID card, we have like a name, birth date, gender. We have like 2 additional category: ethnicity and religion. On service, it looked kind of good. Like, oh, we get represented. Like Korean.
Yeah,
Kachin.
I've got religion on my national ID card. Yeah.
During the Honda time, if you go to like apply for the same job, the guy with the Burmese and Buddhist or Buddhist on his ID card will likely to get more job, get the job. Yeah, there's like a systematic discrimination there.
It's
Of
a
course,
more
it-
subtle way of putting
subtle,
shapes
subtle.
on your clothes.
Yeah, that's why a lot of like my relatives, some of my relatives talk like, oh, they have to change like their religion and ethnicity to get like more, to advance more in their life. It's really suck, really.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
form of ethnocide, right?
Yeah.
Which is not the same as genocide, but ethnocide, which is, systematically getting rid of an ethnic identity rather than the people themselves.
Yep.
So let's talk about the coup. So, like we said, there were these allegations of voter fraud immediately after the election. However, I don't think any of us were really prepared for the coup until a couple of weeks before, and there started to be rumors that a coup might happen, and then lo and behold, it did. Do you want to kind of talk about what the official reasons were given by the Tamadar for the coup?
Okay, before the official reasons, like there are like writing on the walls, like a few months, like after like a week or so after the election happened, voting happens. Like the military was like teasing stuff like if it comes from national sovereignty and security, we cannot rule out like a coup happening or something like that. And Aung San Suu Kyi was like at one point she even like reply like offhanded something like try me try me like
Damn.
physically. Yeah, so yeah, it happened. That hilarious in
And
hindsight.
then they tried her.
Okay, so another writing on the wall in hindsight was like guys like Weir Tu and Bulat Lashwe are like fugitives at that point. They are on the quote unquote run. They are like on the run, but then suddenly like after the election happened, like they suddenly turned themselves in. Yeah, like
These are like very famous right-wing.
Yeah.
Okay. I
voices.
was gonna say who are these people? I don't know.
Sure.
Okay, so one possible thing was like they were like getting themselves arrested officially, like they make the news, and when the military government finally seized power and established its rule, they will be released. They will be given
can
amnesty,
acquit them.
basically. Yeah. Their official reason, like voting fraud, like they need to protect national security, basically. So throughout the history, the military always painted itself like the kingpin that holding the country together, or like the protector of the country from the foreign threats.
Classic. Yeah.
Trying to like give excuse to their isolationist stance, like isolating the country from the outside world. And their argument for like the kingpin that keeps the country together is like, oh, the ethnic rebels are tearing the country apart, so we are the one who is keeping everything like secure. One is secure. Okay.
It's funny because you said kingpin, but I know you meant linchpin. But kingpin implies
linchpin.
drug running, and that's funny
Because they
sorry,
did.
sir.
because that's what they do.
Yeah, they did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, linchpin, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, they kind of presented themselves as the linchpin, and now
Saviors.
Saviors, exactly. And then my kind of take since the coup has always been that there were two kind of underlying real reasons for why they did the coup. Number one was that, well, there's this theory, and I think there's probably some truth to it, which is that there were probably going to be prosecutions for the Rohingya genocide.
Oh yeah,
and Ming
ICJ.
Online, and Ming Online was likely to be given up as a kind of sacrificial lamb to The Hague to face charges if he were to resign, which he was due to retire 6 months from when the coup happened. So he was protecting his own self-interest. And I think there is truth to that.
yeah.
But at the same time, you need a whole army to go along with this. You don't, not just one guy. And I think that, and this is a drum I've been banging for a while, which is that I think it was all this foreign capital that was coming into the country and slipping through the fingers of the Tamadar, and they didn't have as much control as they used to over the capital in the country.
Yeah, can I ask about that? Because like the IMF, if I recall, the IMF gave a bunch of money to the country to like do COVID stuff, and they didn't say, "Oh, you got to pay us back." They didn't say that. They didn't say like, you have to do structural adjustment or anything. They just said, "Have some money, spend it well." And then, so, I'm not saying conspiracy, but it's a bit weird.
Yeah, like in my head, like during when we were like when the coup first happened, me and my French comrade like talking stuff like that, and then like, wait, why did IMF give stuff? And we like there must be a 40 chess like, okay, military, the West will be like military, go like play a coup.
Because I remember
like,
the IMF didn't like officially. Okay, well, when the coup happened, they didn't like denounce the fact that there was now a military coup in power. They sort of went, we're gonna see how it goes. I don't know. Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the thing. And then like another sus thing, like there was like 40 chess happening. I joke because like they hire Israeli Canadian lobbyists, and then they say something like, "Oh, we want to decouple from China and work with the West." Yeah, so
the Tamadar said that immediately after the coup. Yeah.
So,
do you remember what the name of that lobbying firm was for any investigative listeners who might want to look into it?
I think there's like an article by Reuters, so I think you could.
Can you send it to me? We'll put it in the description in case anyone wants to follow up with that. Okay. So what do you think about my theory about the foreign capital being the real cause for the coup?
I think your theory is very credible, but we don't know much yet. There's not much to make about, so I don't want to throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks. Yeah.
So do we want to then go on and talk about the reaction? Because the protest started after a couple of days. We have a good website, a good article on our DinDeng website that we've plugged before. It's called February Revolution Burma, which you can check out, talking about the first couple of days and the initial reaction to the coup. So, I mean, maybe we should just kind of talk about the protests in general because, Nyan, you and I have talked about this a bit. We have definitely quite a lot of criticisms about many aspects of the protesters. And then also there's a lot of great people out there organizing as well. And unfortunately, what seems to be a trend from typically Western people looking at it is to group all of these people into one giant blob. And they're all exactly the same. They all have the same ideology. They're all NLD supporters. And that's not true, right?
As I said, like there are multi parties, but when the election happened, people vote NLD out of like fear. So there was like something like if you from the outside like, oh, NLD is the only party that's doing good or like getting the support. Yeah, so it's understandable. Like we don't get much new coverage. Okay, let's talk about the protests. It's getting hot here, so I have hard time focusing. Apologies.
That's all right.
Okay. The problem is like I think I told you before, like during the junta times, the outside information we got is like RFA, VOA, BBC, and DVB, of course, but I don't think the Westerners would know much about DVB. It's based in Norway, Burmese language news channel. So we have like a very Western-centric viewpoint when it comes to getting outside information. So most people only see like what Americans and the West want them to see. Like they think, oh, Gaddafi's dead, Libya's good now, but they don't know what happened afterward, for example. Of course, that's a closest example like that. So the problem was like, there was like a generation after generation of like I don't want to use that word, like white worshipping, physically, but like they felt like they need to, appeal to the West to get attention.
Yeah. And it's very, I don't want to be, the Westerner criticizing them.
Yeah.
But it is very naive. Like you said, because they just literally, like I think about some of my Burmese friends or my ethnic minority friends, and have they even heard of the Iraq War? A lot of them no, they don't know. So, a lot of people are seeing these protesters, some of whom are calling for Western intervention, and they're like, oh, can you believe these guys? They want America to go in and invade and turn the place into a fucking Walmart or whatever. No, that's not what American intervention is in their minds. It's not the Iraq War. It's not Libya. It's nothing like that. Most of their conception of the West comes from basically Western movies, and that's it. And these kind of Western-centric news organizations that you've mentioned. And even then, this isn't the majority of people. There are a lot of people who do have very good politics, who are very well informed, and you know what? The Western-centric news are not going to talk to them. So there's kind of this cyclical effect going on.
Yeah, like when the protests began to happen, there was like the student union and trade unions try to like form a general strike committee, to coordinate like basically decentralized grassroots movements. And then people started to like curse it, like berate it, denounce it on the online, saying like, oh, trying to steal a spotlight, huh? Stuff like that, like saying
from
like,
the NLD.
Yeah, why are you trying to steal a spotlight? Yeah, they.
Well, I think, and then I mean, the ironic thing as well is that the government in exile, so called, have very much, to the outside world at least, appointed themselves as the leaders of the voices, at least, of the people of Burma, right? And Western outside media sources are very keen to gobble up this, right?
Okay, another ironic thing is when the military crackdowns happen, most of the place where the people didn't get cracked down are the places where the student unions and trade unions are leading the people. Like they are organized basically.
Can I ask as well, like, we've talked about this privately, and you and I have, and Samai as well, we've all been pretty horrified by certain opinions in the Western world, the leftist Western world, actually. I kind of wanted to address this.
These white Maoists.
Critical support for the Tamadar, which is quite sickening. And I really can see how it happens as well. And Nyan, we've talked about this. We can see how this kind of pipeline of people like weirdly ending up critically supporting the Tamadar has come about. I mean, Samai, do you want to actually talk about it? Because you're the kind of Western leftist that knows nothing about Burma.
Oh yeah, but I don't have.
Oh, sorry, you're Thai. I'm sorry.
But the thing is, I'm a Western leftist, and there's nothing about Burma that doesn't have an opinion about Burma.
Okay, good.
Very different.
I mean, have you seen some of this stuff online, right?
I can imagine. I haven't seen it, but I can imagine what it is. So basically, like, neoliberalism is what the Western leftists hate, and we all hate it, right? When a political party that basically represents that exists in an Asian or a global South state, right? Anything that opposes that to the Western leftist is good.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see
that's
the
point
line
I'm
of
saying.
logic there.
That's the point
I don't want to smear all Western leftists.
Yeah.
No. Fuck them. Fuck them. No, I'm kidding. I love you guys.
No. I think that line of reasoning, I even have that line of reasoning. Of course, I'm a little bit like conservative about that. I didn't like jump all the way. Yes, we should support like Putin all the way.
I agree. I'm with you. I think that
it's
people that are positioned against neoliberalism doesn't make them allies. There is critical support, and then there's what the hell are you doing supporting Putin support?
Also, this brings up something which me and Samai were talking about just before we started recording, which is that, like, for example, Samai posted a DinDeng article about the protests in Thailand that he wrote, which is from a very leftist perspective, which is like, we need to shift this movement into a more socialist one. And then,
r/communism.
And it got deleted because people said, oh, you're supporting a color revolution. And it's like, the implication there, right, is like, oh well, Thai leftists and as well, Burmese leftists can have no agency because they're having their minds controlled by the NED, whatever. There can be no such thing as a real Thai a Burmese communist must support the Tamadar because the Tamadar are anti-neoliberalism. No, they have their own agency. They can choose their own critical alliances, and in this case, literally 100% of Burmese leftists, whether they are anarchists, whether they're fucking, the Maoists or tankies or whatever, they've all chosen to support this uprising against the Tamadar, and that should really say something, but apparently falling on completely deaf ears because they are seen to have no agency by these people in the West, and frankly, I think it's quite racist in my opinion. But yeah.
Okay. Some of my like close comrades, some warn like as you say, like everyone support the protest, like every left and every like bourgeois, petty bourgeois, like intellectuals support.
Burma.
Yeah, in Burma. So they want like something like Iranian revolution could happen. You know what happened? Like a communist supported the movement. And we all know who got into the power in the end. Yeah.
And what happened to those communists in the end as well, where they were all executed. So
yeah. So of course they warned. Yeah, it's not wrong to like keep in mind about that, of course. So I'm not like ignorantly endorsing the whole thing, of course.
Yeah.
I just want to give a different perspective, of course. We'll get to that like a class analysis, later. Of course, the Moderate Rebel podcast. Yeah, someone in my keep posting that Brian Barladik. I only call him ball fuck because I hate him so much.
Yeah.
Nice.
So this is the our Thai listeners might know him as Land Destroyer or Cartolucci.
Oh my god!
Yeah. So he's been a big banging on the drum as a Tamadar supporter, basically, or like just completely dismissing the protesters as complete color revolution, NED.
I'll give you some example. Yeah, I can give you some example. He will like show there was like a minor battle. It's a minor the Tamador tried a lot, very hard to secure ceasefire agreements with the ethnic rebels, of course. And during the period, they will like slowly finger their way into like the rebel control land and build like little outposts there, here and there. Now that the civil war officially resumed, what happened was like those outposts were cut off.
Yeah.
They were isolated, and what happened was like KNU, like easy prey. KNU was like, and they were like they attacked it basically and took over that camp easily. They didn't even put up a fight. The Tamador outpost, those stationed in outposts, and the Land Destroyer made a video about it, and he framed it like, oh, you see, the opposition is armed, and I'm like, KNU didn't pop out the air. They have existed, like they are the earliest rebels, like in '48.
Yeah, and also I also want to say on the Moderate Rebels podcast, there were two things that just, a lot of it really bugged me because it was just completely inaccurate anyway. But two things that really bothered me was, number one, he said that the ethnic armed groups were funded by the US, which just is absurd. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I've never heard that claim anywhere before. Right?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other one was that he said that the civilians who were involved in the Rohingya genocide were the same people in Yangon and in Mandalay who were fighting the police. And again, completely absurd, not at all
it's
true.
It's cherry picking. It's cherry picking, picking what he wants.
The people who were fighting, the people who were killing the Rohingya, that was an incredibly localized conflict in that province, which is a long way away from Yangon and Mandalay and wherever, and
of
it's
course
certainly not the same fucking people.
As I said before, like Yangon people don't even know where the Rohingya were at, so they were like blindly.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit. We've mentioned the armed ethnic groups already. I kind of want to talk about their involvement in this because they've been fighting the central government since 1948, and like you say, there's been from certain corners of the world this kind of perception like, oh look, there's also these ethnic rebels aligning with these protesters who are pro-Western whatever, but historically these ethnic rebels will pretty much align with anybody who's gonna help them out in any way, right? So historically the Kachins have aligned with the Chinese, for example, and at the same time, the Karen have aligned with the Thai government in past, and they've been hostile with the Thai government as well. It's all over the place, and it's always been all over the place, right? So, for starters, I just wanted to make the point that, you can't pin all of the armed ethnic groups with the same pin. Like, they don't all follow the same ideology. They're
Can't
not
paint them with the same brush.
Thank you. They're not all aligned necessarily, although some are, and generally their response has been, as well, I would say, quite critically, I mean, not even that critically, quite supportive of the protest movement. And you can see why, because they despise the Tamador like literally everybody else who knows the first thing about the Tamador. So I think one kind of important thing to stress as well has been the ethnic Burmese change of heart towards the ethnic rebels since this protest started. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
People didn't know, they didn't understand how ethnic people are suffering. I mean, I myself didn't know much until I moved to another country. I saw them oh, there are a lot of diaspora in other countries, and I suddenly my eyes or my mind, I know more physically, so I now know more, and I can sympathize with them. And of course, a lot of my friends in the cities were like, "Why are rebels fighting?" And I explained to them. They don't get it, but now they were like, the ethnic rebels are like saviors, suddenly right now, as they should have been. Of course, some of the rebel groups may have been a little lenient on fighting, but they are now, some of them are starting to fight. So good for them, I would say.
But I mean, it has been quite astounding to see this shift, and I would have talked about it on the last episode we did about Burma, how most, like you say, most people in Burma, maybe don't even know, and if not, they don't really care. And it just, if you an interesting thing has been for me, looking at the mentions on Twitter of ethnic minority pages, and then for example, I think I was looking at the KNU's Twitter page or something like that, and suddenly you've got all these Burmese names in the mentions being thank you so much, bless you, you're the absolute heroes, you're the saviors, we're so sorry for ignoring you for so many years.
Yeah, the real thing people thank them was because most of the people, I mean, everyone is unarmed. The military is the only dogs, the top dogs with the guns.
Well,
so
in
they're
Burma, yeah.
Yeah, in Burma. So yeah. So when the people didn't have anything physically to fight back, but the ethnic rebels, they have guns, so they can fight back. So people look up to them, oh my God, yeah.
And also there's this other kind of perception I've noticed, which is oh, we had no idea what suffering was under the Tamadar, and still we started protesting. And now Burmese people are being killed. Oh, now we see. Now we understand.
Even back in the day, to the modern times, if you in the countryside, there are atrocity happening everywhere. Of course, some may be exaggerated or underrepresented, but what usually happen, the Tamadar will come into the village. Troops will come to the village. Yeah. They maybe pull some porters, couriers out of them, slaves, basically, and they will rape, burn, terrorize people, force them to give up stuff, steal stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, they will never get reported, but now it is happening in the cities. So people are saying oh my God, is this what happening in the countryside for decades? Yeah. They suddenly started to realize, oh my God, we have been so ignorant.
And I just wanted to point out one more thing on this, which is that I've still seen some pretty shitty takes coming from ethnic Burmese still. So I'll give you two examples. One was the I think he was the diplomat, the UN diplomat to the from Burma who was appointed by Suu Kyi, and he did a tweet that was like, the Tamadar have been terrorizing the people of Burma since February 2021. And it's like, fuck you, dude. They've been terrorizing people in Burma since 1948. That's a lot fucking longer. And then the other one that really bothered me was there was this Burmese American journalist, and you know, she's Burmese American. I think maybe she grew up there. She has a very American accent. She speaks in quite woke language. I don't want to name her, but I heard her on a podcast, and she says, yeah, the Tamador has for years been accused of raping ethnic women. And it's like that little thing, using the term accused, they've been accused. It's like,
No.
oh, it's just, what, it's just an accusation? No, this is well documented. The amount, like, I've spent, like, what, I don't know, a weeks in total of my life in refugee camps. The amount of people that I've met and the amount of stories I've heard of people being raped is just astonishingly high and horrific. It's not just an accusation.
If I sort of say something and you sort of tell me how much you think it's true,
Okay.
that's because what I'm hearing basically, and what I'm sure my counterparts in the audience will hear, is that a lot of this is, it sounds like the Tamador and then beforehand the junta and then all that stuff. They've all been using like British tactics of like colonial tactics of like the
divide and
rule.
conquer.
And,
Divide and rule.
And then, basically, because that happened in the very beginning, that happened with British occupation, British colonialism, so then, over time, that what used to be not as big of a division becomes a bigger division, and then all of a sudden, they don't even need to, like, enforce division, it just sort of exists. And what you say about people in the cities not understanding the sort of the situation, the goings on about people in various the bordering the states that are towards the outside. I mean, it is like the idea of how when like Scott talks about
James C. Scott represent.
Sorry, we have to say the full name. James C. Scott, author of several books. When James Scott says like things about how the center, the valley,
Imperial
the valley state, the Imperial Valley State Core, Metropole, basically everything that happens there is separate from the rest of the polity, because they've sort of the territory exists, but they only know that it exists because they're told that it exists. It's that Ben Anderson Imagine Communities type situation. So what I'm trying to sort of garble together is that it seems that, especially in light of the coup, a lot of people in Myanmar, Burmans, and are understanding more about their country and are becoming more connected with sort of their fellow, you know, country folk, if you see what I mean. Country, because it's the contentious thing. Anyway,
I think you put it in much better word than I did. I talk about like isolation, relative isolation. People on Yangon don't even know the whole Yangon, you know. So so don't think about Kachin, Chin, and other far-fetched like Deninai. They don't know what happens there. So as you said, like very like isolated pockets. Like imagine community. Oh, Burma, pointed on the map. Like okay, this big, this wide. But have you been there? Have you know about it? Not really.
What's up here? What's down there? I have no idea.
Yeah. So okay, divide and rule. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like mathematically speaking, if every ethnic rebels band together and fight the Tamador, they would have been dead long time ago, gone. But there was no united front like that.
You couldn't be telling anyone to sort of try and make that happen, are you?
It's not gonna happen.
Yeah. The communists tried. It didn't work out. Already tried.
So just to finish it out, I kind of, something that you and I, Nyan, have talked about before is that I really want to underscore how the Tamadar, yes, they are oppressive to minority people, but I think what's really important to remember is that they are also repressive to the working class people of Burma, and there is
Of course,
absolutely
exactly.
no, they have no mandate and they have no constituency. Like, very, like, nobody supports them. So I mean, like, nobody voted for the USDP. So like, even if you want to, support the people who are against neoliberalism, you still have to be a little bit
Yeah,
aware
yeah.
of allowing people to, make their own decisions.
Most of the people, like we already talked in earlier, like people only know the Western centric point of worldview, like history, so they think it's like a struggle between democracy versus authoritarianism, something like that, dictatorship, democracy versus dictatorship. No, we need to look at, like, we cannot forget about the class analysis when it comes to, like, analyze studying, and the military and its class character is like, I think this line was held by, like, CPP, the Communist Party too. The military is class character wise, they are like military bureaucratic capitalists, because they are bureaucratic because they have, like, they are a group of military elites, and yeah,
Administrators.
so it's capitalist. Yeah, administrator. Yeah, they're kind of like capitalist. I think economically speaking, before the military coup in the 60s, the parliament times, the ruling class was like national bourgeoisie fighting each other. That's why they let the military. In the background, there was like a civil war going on. Ethnic rebels are rebelling, so the central government was like, give the Tamaro more power if they need to, like, put down the rebels. You get my point. So the military grew powerful, and they even have their own enterprises, which continues to this day in different names, of course. And
Business enterprises.
yeah, military, yeah, business enterprise. They actually managed to establish a lot during the 50s. So you can see where their class character came from. Like, they are just, and they are very reactionary. So in this battle, like, we have a lot of intellectual people. So they will be like petty bourgeois and like basic peasant. The Burmese most of the Burmese population, if you don't know, like, they are like wage workers. So yeah, they are very proletarian. The problem was, like, they have no. I don't want to berate again. Like, people lack class consciousness. They don't know about that. Decades of, like, political repression will do that to everyone. Like, they don't know, like, difference between classes. They only know, like, democracy good. I don't think they don't even know what liberalism means. They just want democracy. So there is a problem with that inherently. Like, you can get misguided and played by the West, like, as they want, and the military, we call it like a capitalist class, but they practice what the CPP call like a semi-feudal, semi-colonial economy. Like, in colonial economy, the colonizer benefit from it, right? So basically, they act like colonizer and semi-feudal because most of the economy actually run on, like, agriculture mode of production, and the military, funnily enough, controls every inch of land. They, even after the 90s coup, they say something like, even the dirt in the pot, your flower pot, we own it. And you cannot buy land in Burma. You can only buy grants and stuff. So it's like a feudal lord. But I think I said to some people, like, we're stuck in the past basically, and this, like, a little brief window of democracy, quote unquote democracy, like, really open up the windows to the people, and, like, people don't want to go back. Basically, the coup happened, like, too fast, like, only 10 years. So most of the time, people just, like, protested. I don't want to. I keep talking down to my people, in my opinion. So yeah,
I think,
sorry.
and just kind of to wrap it up, I just wanted to say, like you said, I don't like using this word naive in the same way that you say you don't want to talk down to people, but there is an element of naivety, and that is understandable. So when you see people on Twitter or online or in the news calling for maybe Western involvement, talking shit about China or Russia or whatever, I mean, let's just consider where they're coming from, which is decades and decades of being in complete isolation, and then a very brief window, like you mentioned, of free speech and being able to access information which is not censored, and
they don't want to go back.
Abandon them to to nothing. Let's critically support them. Let's reach out to them when we can and support this uprising, because really, these people have agency. We have comrades in Burma and they have agency, and we should support them as they like.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, you put it well.
So Nyan, I wanted to thank you very much for joining us and giving us your insight. And Samaya, I wanted to thank you for your occasional questions.
I was listening. I was learning a lot. I was listening very hard.
So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back next week. So bye bye.
Thank you.